New Zealand is emptying out. And this time it's not a temporary holiday exodus. People are packing up their lives and leaving for good, in numbers that would make demographers reach for their calculators and politicians reach for recovery plans. Let's put the scale in perspective. In the past year, roughly 130,000 people left the country, a record high. But the startling fact isn't the headcount alone. It's who's walking out the door and why they aren't coming back. After you subtract returnees, New Zealand recorded a net migration loss of well over 50,000 citizens, the sort of figure you normally see after a major crisis, not during peacetime. That's the equivalent of an entire city uprooting itself in 12 months. Where are they going? Mostly next door, Australia. The land across the Tasman has become the primary destination, luring nurses, teachers, engineers, IT pros, and other skilled workers with higher pay, steadier job markets, and a slightly easier cost of living balance. The pattern is painfully predictable. When your neighbors offer better wages and more affordable housing, talent votes with its feet. Why should anyone care? Because this exodus isn't a trivia item for weekend water cooler talk. It rewires how society functions. When doctors and nurses relocate, hospital rosters thin and patient wait times lengthen. When teachers leave, class sizes grow and after-school programs suffer. When engineers and construction specialists depart, projects stall and infrastructure timelines blow out. These aren't abstract losses. They're the human scaffolding that keeps daily life running. And the demographic mix of those leaving is especially worrying. It's not retirees chasing sunshine. It's prime working-age adults, the people you want to anchor neighborhoods, start businesses, and raise the next generation. Losing them creates a double whammy: immediate skill shortages and a long-term weakening of civic energy. Neighborhoods that were once vibrant begin to empty boardrooms and playgrounds alike. The numbers tell a deeper story, too. This isn't a scattershot migration of adventurous souls. It's targeted, job-driven movement. Tens of thousands of registrants, especially in healthcare, have taken steps to work overseas. In a single year, thousands of nurses applied to practice in Australia, a surge that has left local hospitals scrambling. Education is similarly strained. Forecasts show the system could be short of more than 1,000 teachers in upcoming years. That's not a statistic. That's morning school lines, teacher shortages, and fewer extracurriculars. And here's the harsh economic logic. When a country starts losing its best-trained workers, the cost of replacement skyrockets. Recruiters must offer bigger salaries, hospitals must pay overtime, and training pipelines are stretched thin. The result is a cascading cost for the public purse and employers, and the very services citizens expect begin to fray. There's also a morale effect. When neighbors, friends, and colleagues leave, the people who stay behind begin to question their own futures. Local optimism, the invisible fuel for entrepreneurship and civic involvement, drains away. Young families who would normally plant roots start thinking of overseas options. That turns what began as an economic problem into a social one. Fewer volunteers, fewer new businesses, fewer mentors for the next generation. Finally, this migration isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a global trend where geography and policy choices are reshaping where talent wants to live. But the speed and scale in New Zealand are what make this episode alarming. When entire cohorts decide the future is brighter elsewhere, reversing course becomes an uphill political and economic battle. We'll peel back the curtain on why people are fleeing, the housing crunch, wage stagnation, runaway prices, and policy missteps that turned a once affordable paradise into a place too costly for many to call home. What broke the home? Housing, easy money, and a paycheck that can't keep up. Anatomy of the crisis. This mess didn't appear overnight. A cluster of policy choices and market dynamics collided, and housing sat dead center of the blast. Start with the plain facts. Homes in New Zealand have gotten absurdly expensive. Put numbers next to the feeling and it gets ugly fast. The typical annual wage hovers around 2,241,600 pesos, while the average house price in Auckland sits near 33.7 million pesos. Translate that into real-life terms, and you find an Aucklander would need to save practically every penny for more than a decade, and that's without paying rent, eating, or living. In other words, home ownership went from plausible to pipe dream for a generation. Rent was supposed to be the safety valve. Instead, it turned into a pressure cooker. Across the country, shared flat residents often dump well over half their weekly income on rent. Numbers show about 56% in extreme cases. National weekly averages place Auckland at roughly 95,700 pesos per month, and the country near 84,800 pesos per month. Almost half of renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing, and 1 in 4 pay north of 40%. When shelter devours that much cash, everything else, food, transport, savings, gets squeezed out. So how did homes become such luxury items? There are 3 big drivers. 1, a supply mismatch, not just a no-build problem. Yes, there's a housing shortage, but it's nuanced. Some reports estimate a shortfall in the tens of thousands, estimates around 65,000 missing homes. Yet new construction in some years actually outpaced population growth. The catch? Builders are not delivering enough of the right homes in the right places. Urban centers where people want to live, think Auckland and other education and job hubs, still face acute shortages because planning red tape, slow infrastructure rollout, and zoning hurdles stifle projects. The houses being built are often too far from jobs or too ill-fitted for demand, so affordability never improves where it matters most. 2. Cheap credit turned property into speculation. For years, borrowing was cheap. The real kicker came during the pandemic, when interest rates fell to historic lows, sometimes below 2%. Cheap mortgages meant buyers could borrow more, pushing demand and prices skyward. Between 2020 and 2021 alone, average house values surged by over 32%, a spike that turbocharged investor activity. Suddenly, homes weren't just places to live, they were vehicles for wealth creation. Investors piled in, clicking buy, not to raise a family, but to grow capital. That dynamic pushed first-time buyers out of the market, creating a 2-tier system, a smaller class of owners getting wealthier and a swelling group of renters stuck on the outside. 3. Inflation outran wage gains. House prices exploded, but so did everyday costs. Consumer prices rocketed, with inflation hitting around 7.2% annually at its peak, and a shocking 7.3% spike in mid-2022, the fastest in 3 decades. Food inflation climbed too. Year-on-year food price growth hit 4.6% at one point, and certain staples saw double-digit jumps quarter to quarter. Meanwhile, wages barely budged. Pay raises of 4 to 5% in 2021 to 2022 left many households effectively poorer in real terms. Even later wage growth, around 7.6% in late 2023, only clawed back lost ground for a few. For most families, paychecks lagged price rises, the textbook recipe for falling living standards. Put those 3 together and the result is obvious: a housing market pumped by cheap credit, starving for the right supply, and households squeezed by runaway prices. That's why so many people looked across the Tasman and saw an easier life. But there's another twist. Policy responses often came too late or missed the target. Attempts to cool investor demand and tweak regulations arrived after prices had already surged and after many buyers were priced out. Infrastructure and planning reforms moved at bureaucratic speeds, while market dynamics reacted daily. The lag between policy and impact left citizens trapped in a volatile market without timely relief. Housing is the headline, but the housing story bleeds into wages, services, and national morale. When shelter costs devour income, people change life plans, postpone families, delay investment, and ultimately consider emigration. That's exactly what we saw. And now, what are the human fallout, the brain drain, the collapsing services, and why New Zealand's struggle should be a red flag for other nations? However, the exodus isn't just a stat. It's empty hospital shifts, longer waits, and classrooms stretched thin. When thousands of nurses, teachers, and engineers leave, the effects are immediate. Understaffed wards, bigger classes, delayed infrastructure, and businesses that can't hire. That's not tomorrow's problem. It's happening now. Why it matters. Skilled workers are costly to replace. Training takes years. Recruitment costs skyrocket. Governments and employers end up paying more for lower quality service. Over time, agency fees and emergency hires become the norm. Meanwhile, morale collapses. Communities lose mentors, entrepreneurs postpone plans, and local optimism drains away. As public services wobble, the economy follows. Construction slowdowns, retail weakness, and dipping GDP become real risks. Investors hate instability. Delayed projects and talent gaps scare off new money. What began as a social issue quickly becomes an economic drag. So what actually works? Build the right homes in the right places. Fast-track zoning and infrastructure in job hubs. Medium-density development near transit beats distant sprawl and matches where people want to live. Cool, speculative demand. Targeted taxes or tighter lending rules for investor purchases can reduce price pressure without penalizing genuine buyers. Make wages keep pace. Link minimum and public sector pay more closely to inflation and push productivity-linked raises in the private sector so incomes stop sliding behind prices. Keep essential workers at home. Offer retention packages, housing support, bonuses, faster licensing, and flexible schedules for nurses, teachers, and engineers. Pair approvals with rapid infrastructure commitments, water, power, roads, so new homes are actually livable on day one. Boost domestic training. Scale apprenticeships, scholarships, and bonded training programs so the country produces the doctors, teachers, and tradespeople it needs. New Zealand's crisis is a case study, a warning to other countries. If housing soars while wages stagnate, the talent flight follows. Cities and countries should treat these early signs as red flags, act early or pay dearly later. This is fixable, but it needs pressure and political will. To stay informed, like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which solution matters most where you live? Faster home building, curbing speculative buying, or better pay for essential workers? Stay connected.